Rome in 1513 was a city of extremes. Marble palaces and gilded halls reflected the wealth of the elite, while narrow streets and crowded piazzas showed the lives of ordinary citizens struggling under heavy taxes and harsh moral laws. In the midst of this city, a man would rise to the pinnacle of spiritual authority. Giovanni de Medici, scion of one of Florence's most powerful families, would become Pope Leo X. But his papacy would not be remembered for piety or wisdom. It would be remembered for indulgence, excess, and scandal. Leo X, the first Medici pope, became infamous for keeping a harem of young boys in the Vatican, flaunting lovers openly at court, and spending freely while ordinary Romans were punished for minor moral transgressions. His lifestyle was not only shocking, it exposed a church teetering on the brink of moral collapse. A church whose corruption would spark one of the most significant religious revolutions in history. How could the man who claimed to be God's representative on earth lead a life so scandalous that it drew the attention of the entire continent? What consequences did his actions have for the church and for Europe? Stay with this story until the end, and you will uncover how Leo X's indulgences, his defiance of morality, and his extraordinary lifestyle helped ignite a movement that would forever change Christianity. Giovanni de Medici was born into privilege, but that privilege came with responsibility and expectation. His father, Lorenzo the Magnificent, ruled Florence with unparalleled influence, using wealth, alliances, and cunning to ensure that the Medici family maintained its power. When Innocent VIII married his son to Lorenzo's daughter, the union secured not only political advantages, but also ecclesiastical advancement. Giovanni was awarded a cardinal's hat, an honor that promised power, influence, and prestige at an age when most young men were still learning the basics of theology and Latin. Lorenzo's advice was clear. Rome was not a city for the virtuous. The temptations were endless, the ambitions high, and the political games brutal. It will be hard to live a virtuous life in the eternal city, Lorenzo warned. Giovanni, however, chose to ignore his father's caution. He arrived in Rome with youthful confidence, eager to embrace the grandeur, the pageantry, and the opportunities that awaited him. Little did he know, his time in Rome would define a papacy that history would remember not for wisdom or reform, but for excess and scandal. Rome under Leo X was a city of contrasts. While the streets were crowded with citizens paying heavy fines for minor moral offenses, the Vatican became a palace of indulgence. The treasury was drained, yet the Medici Pope indulged in a lifestyle of lavishness that surpassed anything seen before. Giovanni's appetite for pleasure was insatiable, and his court became a center of both political maneuvering and sexual intrigue. Leo X preferred the company of handsome young boys and men, including the singer Solimondo, who became his most famous companion. These companions were not hidden. They moved openly within the papal court, attended banquets, and entertained guests. While ordinary Romans were punished for sexual acts, Leo flaunted his affairs with impunity. The hypocrisy was glaring. The Pope enforced morality on the city, yet he himself lived without restraint. The papal court became a theater of excess. Every feast, every performance, every celebration was an opportunity for display, a performance of wealth, power, and indulgence. Yet beneath the glittering surface, a moral decay was growing. The public began to notice that the rules they were forced to follow did not apply to the highest authority in Christendom. The tension between moral expectation and lived reality would have far-reaching consequences for the Church. Leo X inherited a treasury depleted by his predecessor, Julius II, who had spent extravagantly on military campaigns, art, and the decoration of the Vatican. To replenish the coffers, Leo implemented a series of fines for sins such as premarital sex, incest, and sodomy. He also continued the practice of selling indulgences, a system in which the faithful could pay for forgiveness of sins. The irony of Leo's actions was unmistakable. While ordinary citizens faced punishment and financial penalties for moral transgressions, the Pope openly indulged in the very behaviors he punished. His lovers walked the halls of the Vatican without fear, while the people of Rome were terrorized with threats of purgatory and eternal damnation if they did not comply with his financial demands. The resentment among the public grew. Rome was no longer just a city of grandeur. It had become a city of exploitation. The Medici Pope's policies highlighted a stark double standard: morality for the masses, indulgence for the elite. This tension would later become a central grievance in the widespread critique of the Church that fueled the Protestant Reformation. If you are intrigued by how power and corruption coexisted at the heart of the Vatican, hit the like button and subscribe. The next chapter of this story reveals just how far Leo X went to protect his secrets and indulge his desires, and why it would enrage not just Rome, but the entire continent. The corruption of the Vatican had reached a point that even some within the Church could no longer ignore it. A measure was proposed in the Curia, a papal bull to limit the number of boys that cardinals could keep as their lovers. The motion aimed to curb the blatant sexual abuses of high-ranking clergy and protect the reputation of the Church. It was a rare attempt at reform, a small but significant check on the excesses of the papal court. Leo X, however, refused to allow the measure to pass. He vetoed the bull outright. His decision sent a clear message: the Pope's desires and indulgences were untouchable. No law, no reform, and no moral argument could challenge his authority. The veto was not only a personal defense, it became a symbol of the Church's broader moral failure. The Medici Pope had placed himself above the very system he was supposed to uphold. The reaction to Leo's veto was immediate. Discontent among the public and the clergy alike intensified. The perception of the Pope as a man living in blatant contradiction to his office fueled frustration across Europe. The seeds of reform and rebellion were being planted, and they would soon sprout in the most unexpected way. In 1517, Martin Luther, a German monk and scholar, challenged the Church by publishing his famous 95 Theses. Luther condemned the sale of indulgences and the moral corruption of the clergy, directly implicating practices exemplified by Leo X. The timing was no coincidence. For decades, ordinary Europeans had witnessed the widening gap between the Church's moral preaching and the behavior of its leaders. Leo X's lifestyle, his vetoes against reform, and his open indulgence provided tangible proof of a system in crisis. Luther's theses spread like wildfire. The invention of the printing press allowed his critiques to reach cities and villages far from Wittenberg. What began as a theological debate quickly became a movement challenging the entire structure of Christendom. Leo X, confident in the authority of the papacy, initially underestimated the monk. He viewed Luther as an annoying scholar, not a revolutionary. Yet the movement grew, fueled in no small part by the excesses of the Medici Pope. The Protestant Reformation was born not only from theological disputes, but also from the moral failures of those at the top of the Church hierarchy. Leo X's indulgences, his flaunted affairs, and his protection of high-ranking clergy's immoral practices created the conditions for a religious upheaval that would reshape Europe forever. Leo X's death in 1521 marked the end of an era. His papacy had been short, yet its impact was immense. The Vatican remained a center of power and wealth, but the treasury was depleted. His indulgent lifestyle, the flaunting of his lovers, and his refusal to implement reforms left a legacy of moral and financial imbalance. For posterity, Leo X is remembered both as a patron of the arts and as a man whose personal vices became emblematic of papal decadence. His court, once a symbol of Renaissance grandeur, became a cautionary tale of excess and moral hypocrisy. The Medici Pope's indulgence in pleasure and power set the stage for reformers, revolutionaries, and critics to question the authority of the papacy for centuries to come. The question remains, was Leo X merely a product of his environment, shaped by Florence's wealth and Rome's corruption, or was he the man who perfected the Church's moral failures? His life forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, desire, and human nature. Pope Leo X's story is not just one of scandal, it is a story of consequences. His indulgences, his protection of immoral practices, and his defiance of reformers contributed directly to a movement that would change Christianity forever. The Protestant Reformation was not just about theology. It was about the stark contrast between the ideals preached by the Church and the reality lived by its leaders. If the head of the Catholic Church could indulge in vice while punishing the faithful, what does that say about the institution itself? Leo X's life challenges us to think critically about authority, morality, and the ways power can corrupt even the most sacred offices. If you want to uncover more hidden stories of the Vatican, more scandals, and the secrets history tried to bury, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. The next story will take you even deeper into the lives of the men who wielded both power and desire in history's most influential institutions.